I'm honestly struck at how meaningful what you just said is. Honestly, I'm a professor. I've been doing this decades. And I think you just summed up almost all of it for a consumer in about 2, 3 minutes. And I'm blown away right now. That was awesome, man. Well, Bob, thank you so much today for joining us on the Land and Everything Else podcast. Craig Lemoyne, and I'm so happy that you're taking the time out of your day to meet with us.
Well, thank you for having me. This is I'm really excited to do this and looking forward to a great conversation here.
Well, thank you so much. The first thing I'd love if you shared with our group is a little bit about what you do and who you're affiliated with. I think that's a really interesting story to talk about.
Absolutely. So I run an organization called Retirement Researcher. And what we are is, well, an organization designed to help people design, build, and then maintain their own retirement plan. We started out of, a traditional fee-only, asset management organization. And we realized that a lot of people just don't want that traditional financial advisor, but they still need some help. And this is something that we've really been working on, how to provide that help. And that's where Retirement Researcher comes in, to be able to give you all the tools that you need, show you how a financial advisor would approach this, but allow you to do it for yourself.
So Retirement Researcher, we're looking at retirees mostly, or pre-retirees? What kind of?
I'd say it's generally people who are right around that point in time. So, I'd say probably half of our members and the people in our Retirement Researcher community are not retired yet. The other half have already retired, but it's generally people in, say, the 5 to 10 years on either side. People who are really looking at retirement as their primary financial concern. You've either been saving up for retirement and looking at how to kind of put that plan into place, or you've started retirement and looking at that distribution piece of it and making sure that everything's being handled appropriately, that you're taking all of the steps that you need to. You're doing all of the things that you need to make sure that your retirement's going to be as successful as possible across all the different dimensions.
So when we get into those different dimensions and retirement, again, one more Retirement Researcher question before we pivot.
I love talking about it.
Yeah, and I like hearing about it too. Because I know we've got quite a few folks on here that are, considering their own retirements or work with consumers and clients that may find some interest and huge value. What type of tools? So I go on Retirement Researcher, I sign up. What kind of tools do I have available and that kind of thing?
Absolutely. We have a pretty broad range of tools. So, within our membership site, the Retirement Researcher Academy, we've got tons and tons of educational content. But we do have a number of different tools available. So we have, our funded ratio analysis tool, which is, the household balance sheet approach, kind of that pension type of analysis where we match up the present value of your assets against the present value of your liabilities and make sure things kind of line up. But I think the one that you're driving at is something that's called the RISA. And what that's short for is Retirement Income Style Awareness. It's something that we've actually developed internally. It's technically a separate company now, but what it is it's designed to really tease out how individuals approach retirement income. Because so many people try and put everyone into one box. If you're talking to a life insurance agent, they're going to sell you an annuity, and they're going to say everyone needs this sort of approach. Everyone needs that paycheck throughout their life. If you're talking to a fee-only financial planner, they're going to put you into some market-like portfolio because, well, frankly, that's how they get paid, just like the insurance guy. And neither approach is wrong. Both approaches can be great for the right person. And what the RISA does is help you figure out which approach is right for you. how should you be approaching this question? And, how should you be putting your plan together based on this approach or based on this information, excuse me, because different approaches call for different strategies. And finding that out is incredibly powerful. So you can truly build the retirement plan that works for you.
Well, on that note, let's pivot and have a bit of a conversation on income and retirement approaches and things like that. So on the Land and Everything Else podcast, one of the things we like to look at in the world is there's a lot of education information out there on stocks and bonds, and there's a reason for that. And I think you and I will get into that today a little bit. But I kind of wanted to get into, when we talk about income and we talk about retirement, can you share a little bit? We have the common income tools, right? We have old school sort of pension income. We've got, qualified plans to pull out of. We've got different non-qualified assets. Annuitizing some of the portfolio may make sense. Do you, when you start looking at retirement and income and retirees, I was kind of wondering if you could give some initial thoughts on sources that people may have available when they get to that stage.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would say that there's really two big categories. There's three categories, but really two big ones that most people will want to be focusing in on. There's what we classify as reliable income. So that's things that, generally have some sort of contract around them. You can say, hey, I'm going to get this amount of money at this date, or something relatively close to that. And then more risky assets. And, basically everything that we're going to be talking about, everything that you can be talking about with your plan will probably fall into one of those two buckets. And it's really going to be a question of, when you're building out your plan, how do you decide how much of each bucket do you want? Are you comfortable with? Now, in terms of kind of our conversation here, I think, a lot of what I run into when people are looking at real estate is a little bit of uncertainty of how to think about the income that they're going to be getting from different sorts of real estate investments. If we're talking about REITs, no one really thinks that's reliable income. Those things are really great tools, or can be really great tools, but they're bouncing all over the place. If you're looking at, say, a 2-unit apartment building and owning that directly, that starts being a little bit more of a question for how to kind of think about the level of risk that you're taking there, in terms of, not necessarily partially in terms of the value of the building, because that's always a component of these investments, but also the ongoing income stream.
So,
that's something, please go ahead.
Oh, no. I think when we start looking at, physical real estate, and I think that maybe we have sort of, I don't know, a REIT style fund-based real estate, right? And the same way that we could look at mutual funds and stocks, I think, while it's not an exact parallel, I think there's some parallel there. When we start looking at it, it's very basic, right? Like land, for example, maybe we acquire land, maybe we can rent, maybe there's some cash lease, but I think you're dead on when we look at buckets, because the contractual income, even when we look at real estate and rents and REITs and all those things, there is a lot of variability at work there, right? Especially from year to year, right? I may be able to have a certain 1-year return, but then we've got things like vacancies and units. And so I love the idea of looking at retirement through that lens, of one lens being, this is contractual, this is between me and one of the biggest life insurance companies in the world, and they're going to be there, or this is between me and Social Security, right? That kind of thing. And the idea of within that other bucket. So let's talk about that other bucket for a minute. And I know my mind's going a little mile a minute here, but when we look at that other bucket, I think there's some gradated, more risky, less risky income. And where do you kind of fall on that?
Absolutely. And, it will, obviously, it's always going to depend on the specifics here. On one side, on that reliable bucket, say you have a bond ladder of treasuries.
Okay.
If the U.S. Treasury defaults, your bond ladder is probably the least of your problems at that point.
I've always said that as well. Yeah.
Yeah. But, within that risky bucket, you're absolutely right. There is a lot of gradation. Let's say you have, sticking with the bond ladder, a bond ladder of triple B bonds. You're almost guaranteed that those things are going to pay out. But I'm not sure I would call that reliable. That's something where there is some level of risk. That's something I would say is, yeah, you're probably going to get that. You're probably fine. But, would I bet my retirement on it? No. On the other hand, we go to, stocks. If you're thinking about dividend income off of stocks, which is a whole separate thing, but that is most definitely not reliable income because that dividend, there's no guarantee that they're going to give that to you. There's no guarantee you're going to get the same amount. There's a big gradation, throughout the entirety of this type of analysis, this type of framework. And a big chunk of this is really being able to look at it and decide, how am I structuring the risk within my plan? And, one of the big things we're looking at, if we do go into that real estate type of space, for most people, it's a lot riskier than they think in terms of that income stream. At least that's been my experience. People kind of understate the level of risk they're taking on there.
Well, and I think with physical real estate, there's generally an understatement of downside. I think that kind of goes with the territory, right? Of a unit not being rented, of physical depreciation, of damage, of those things. So I always do encourage folks that are considering real estate as part of a portfolio. If we're going to have to call a property management company every time something goes wrong, that's an entirely different model than if it's something I'm very comfortable with and handling on my own, which I think then plays into retirement a little bit and aging. To that
Absolutely.
element, right? Because when we start retirement, we may be a lot more comfortable with some of our income being in that variable bucket, right? Because we have a longer time frame and perhaps accumulation is still going to be a big piece of it. But when I think of somebody who's 85 to 90, wielding a hammer and fixing something in a rental house, I kind of challenge myself on that comment.
Absolutely. So one thing I'll reframe that a little bit, because one of the things we found is that people's attitudes towards at least the types of risk that they take in terms of their retirement income doesn't necessarily change that much through time. If you're someone who is just comfortable with, market risk as, the source of your income, that's going to be relatively consistent throughout your life. What we do see is that the level of risk tolerance, though, definitely does change. And certainly to your example, someone who is looking to manage their own property, that's a fun side project when you're 65.
Right.
Not as much when you're 85.
And I was trying to hit on that, right? That idea. Yeah. I agree entirely on, that the risk tolerance and market, financial literacy and my understanding and basic knowledge of stocks and bonds, when I hit retirement, probably isn't going to change that much in 5 to 10 years. So when we look overall at kind of aging, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about that. So as we move from retirement to our 70s, to our 80s, where do you see income? Does it change, or is it pretty consistent where people draw income from? Is there preferences towards different buckets? I mean, what have y'all seen over there?
Like I said, I don't think it's that piece of it is that much age based. It's if you are comfortable with your plan being market oriented, if you're in what we call the total return quadrant, where you're comfortable with generating your income from risky assets, you're generally going to be comfortable with that throughout your life. If you're someone who, does want that reliable income, you do want, basically a paycheck throughout retirement, that's going to be consistent throughout your life. So that piece of it doesn't change all that significantly. Those tend to be pretty consistent through time. So, that's not something I see changing all that much.
So I've got a question for you, and it's going to require your CFA hat for a minute.
Okay.
How have you seen interest rates dropping and rising and easing impact retirement income streams?
I'll start this out by saying, I'm a big fan of Fama's statement that the best predictor of tomorrow's interest rates are today's.
Yeah, yeah.
Just with the caveat, they're really bad predictors. But that being said, one of the things that I always call out when people ask about this is when interest rates go up, reliable income gets cheaper.
Okay.
And what that will imply is just like any other good. When you want to buy something, let's say I'm talking about a car.
Okay.
And I'm out there, I'm looking to go buy a new car. Don't exactly know how much I want. I'm just kind of out there looking. And if the price shifts down in that market, I'm probably going to buy a nicer car than I would have otherwise. And it's exactly the same thing here. When reliable income goes on sale effectively, I now have the opportunity to buy a little bit more, guarantee a little bit more of my income. And, that may be attractive. When interest rates shift substantially, especially when they shift up, meaning that bond prices go down and annuity prices can go down as well, because annuities are just kind of wrappers for bonds. It's worth reevaluating how much reliable income you want in your portfolio. You might decide it's worth taking on a little bit more because those prices are just that much better. When interest rates come back down, probably not as much reevaluation needs to be done there. But, these things respond to, the market, just like everything else.
I love that perspective. I absolutely love the idea. That concept is somewhat unique here, and I really do enjoy that. The idea that interest rates go up and that reliable bucket is someone on sale. I think that's a phenomenal way to view this. Man, I really love that.
Absolutely. I mean, we all respond to incentives. We all have a certain amount of money, and we're looking at how much in this context, we're looking at how much of our income we want to insure, for lack of a better word. And how much is that going to cost?
Man, I love that. So I got two more good questions for you, Bob, and I'd love to wrap them up. These two, I think one's really important. So you had said earlier, people come to the site maybe 5-10 years from retirement. Maybe they've just retired. So let's say
Yep.
I am 55. I've got a nest egg. I'm coming on. What does that 55-year-old, if you're given some educational advice here, not specific to assets, but educational, right? You're 55,
Absolutely.
You're coming in. What are some things I need to start thinking about, doing, considering, modeling? Where would you point me?
Yep. Yeah. So the first thing that I'd suggest is taking the RISA. And we actually have that available for free on our website. So retirementresearcher.com/free RISA, FREERISA, to really kind of understand, well, how do you approach retirement income? As you get closer and closer to retirement, how should you be building your plan? I would say someone who's 10 years from retirement, in all honesty, that's kind of early enough in the process. You're not really doing that much different.
Sure.
It's still, when you're at that point, the biggest issue is your savings rate. If you save enough, you're going to be okay. And there's certainly things we can look at, your investments and all that type of stuff to optimize or to kind of fine tune these things. But as long as you're not doing anything, too out there, you're probably okay. I always like to start with that kind of message. But as you get closer and closer to retirement, there are more things you want to be thinking about. There are more things that you want to be putting into place. There are more questions that you want to be starting to answer about what does your retirement look like? What are the things that we want to be paying attention to? And how do we want to structure the plan that you're going to be putting into place? And that's really the stuff that we really want to be diving into. In fact, earlier this summer, we actually had a workshop within our academy. In our workshops, we do these monthly where it's a 2 to 3 hour deep dive on some subject where we actually broke down, well, what should you be doing in, say, that last year right before you retire? What are the questions that you should be answering? And frankly, a lot of that comes down to, what are you doing in retirement? What does retirement look like for you? Because to a very large degree, by that point, the hay's already in the barn. You've saved almost all of the money that you're going to save. That last year is not unimportant, but if you're counting on that last year of savings to put you over the edge for your retirement plan, I'd say there's some reevaluation that probably needs to be done. So what you want to be doing as you approach retirement is really focusing in on what retirement means. What is a good retirement? What is an enjoyable retirement? Because most people, don't answer those questions, don't think about those questions. And, they go out, they play golf, they play pickleball, they do whatever they want for the first year or two. And then they realize there's got to be something more here. And they have to go on that journey themselves to try and figure out what's valuable to them. Whereas if you start, if you figure this out before you start that retirement journey, that's something that's very, very powerful. That's something that sets you up for that successful retirement. And I don't want to downplay the numbers piece of it, the traditional financial planning stuff. But it's important to remember the money's a scaffolding. The money's there to sustain the things that are valuable to you and to allow you to do the things that you want. You just need to be able to answer that question. What are those things?
I'm honestly struck at how meaningful what you just said is. Honestly, I'm a professor. I've been doing this decades. And I think you just summed up just almost all of it for a consumer in about 2-3 minutes. And I'm blown away right now. That was awesome, man. That was really
thank
cool.
You. We've also got the normal, how to optimize your Social Security stuff in there.
The purpose and the passion and thinking, oh my gosh, I loved that. That's amazing. Oh my gosh. All right. One last question as I'm fanboying over here. And I am a little bit, but I will say one last question then. So a lot of our audience are, advisors and insurance agents and registered reps, as much as we are gaining quite an audience in the consumer space too. But I will say in the first element, you're talking to a room of advisors, reps, agents about retirement. What is something that we can all do a little bit better?
Yeah. So the first thing I'd say is, start using the RISA. That's actually something that we sell through that separate RISA company for financial advisors to start bringing into their own practice. And we've seen a number of advisors start doing that very, very successfully to be able to help their clients answer these questions. But what I would say as a broad statement, the big thing that I would see that a lot of advisors do is, I almost think of it as focusing on the easy stuff. They focus in on the assets, the numbers, what they can run a spreadsheet around. Whereas, that's not the piece of retirement that people need. They need help with it. I don't want to I don't want to downplay this aspect of it. It is the scaffolding. If you don't have that income, it doesn't matter how much you think about what you want to do in retirement. If you don't have the income, you can't do it. That's as simple as that depending on the goal. It's as simple as that. But what I would say is really start thinking more about helping people decide and figure out, what does a good retirement look like? And, one of the other things I'll say is, I think we as an industry, and I'm including myself in this, I'm a principal at our sister firm, McLean Asset Management, which is that traditional advisory firm. We as an industry are really not great at getting both partners in a couple, to be involved in the process. That's something that, I think everyone, ourselves included, needs to work very hard at. There's in a lot of cases a kind of a division of labor. But both people are participating in this retirement, and making sure that everyone's on the same page is something that is really, really powerful. And it's not always the easiest thing in the world, unfortunately. But really focusing in on what people want to be doing in retirement, making sure that their plans fit both partners, if that person's married, and really just overall making sure that the retirement plans fit them and their particular situation, and not simply running the numbers and getting the answer, because it's easy. And in fact, Pete, I'm not sure if you know our backstory. I know you originally actually reached out to Wade Pfau. Wade, Alex, and I actually got together because we were developing a financial planning tool for financial advisors, one of those Monte Carlo tools to run the numbers. That's how we all got together. That's how all of this got started. So, those numbers are very important. And there's a lot going on there. But the more you can broaden that scope, the more successful that we can be as an industry in serving people.
Well, I can't thank you enough for that answer, for your time today, and this absolutely awesome discussion of retirement.
Well, thank you, Pete. This has been really great, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, thanks. It was great talking with you today.